Upon hearing the name of Agatha, everyone leaned in closer, their curiosity piqued as they gazed at the blue-haired witch on the screen, the youngest high-awakened witch in the history of Takira. Many gasped in astonishment, having thought Agatha perished in Takira years ago, while others wondered how she managed to survive for 400 years, still looking the way she did 400 years ago. Phyllis confirmed that the person beside her was indeed the real Agatha, and she recounted how Agatha had frozen herself while returning to her research tower when she was suddenly ambushed by demons, subsequently defeating all her pursuers, until the Witch Union rescued her from the Stone Tower ruins. Hearing this, Pasha couldn't help but get excited, a thrilling idea surging from the depths of her heart. If Phyllis wasn't in danger and the person beside her was the youngest high-awakened witch of Takira, could Agatha possibly be the chosen one? As this question was asked, Phyllis shook her head. She glanced at Agatha and then asked if she could speak with everyone alone. Agatha nodded and then left the main hall. Phyllis then shared her insights from her recent days in the city of Neverwinter, revealing that she had found the chosen one and slowly narrated an almost unbelievable experience. Astoundingly, the one they had been searching for 400 years, the chosen one, turned out to be a mortal king. When Phyllis announced this, the other side erupted in disbelief, with many claiming that Phyllis must be mistaken. Phyllis had expected such reactions and assured them that she had personally verified it. The light emitted by Roland even surpassed what the magic stone could contain. Clinging to a last hope, Pasha asked if this mortal king possessed any magical powers. Phyllis shook her head, informing everyone that Roland had no magic, and he couldn't activate the divine instrument. Her response cast a shadow over everyone's faces, but her next words piqued their curiosity again. Phyllis told Pasha that Roland was willing to cooperate with them against the demons. The witches on the other side, upon hearing this, started to question again. Phyllis didn't explain much, simply sharing what she had witnessed during her stay, and telling them that Agatha had great confidence in Roland. Agatha believed that given enough time, the city of Neverwinter could defeat the demons. And that is the reason why Agatha is serving Roland to prepare for the upcoming Third Divine War. Clearly, everything Phyllis had revealed was hard for the Takira witches from 400 years ago to accept, especially the part about Agatha serving a mortal king. Some of them even wondered if Agatha had gone mad. The crowd was abuzz with noisy discussions, recalling the First Divine War and how they had lost to the demons. Mortals had opened the city gates to surrender to the demons, and although the witch army had rushed to their aid, they were rejected by the lords, refused to open the gates, and could only watch helplessly as the demons gradually annihilated every one of their witch sisters. Some mortals even collaborated with the demons. Listening to the witches' discussions, Pasha shared the same concerns. What they had seen from the mortals' past actions had already lost all credibility. Perhaps this so-called Roland Wimbledon was an outstanding mortal king, but how could he represent every mortal? He would be sick, he would age and die. If the war continued for another 20 or 30 years, would he remain as steadfast and vigorous as in his youth? What about his descendants? Would his successors inherit his will? Before long, Celine stepped in to calm everyone. She had worked with Agatha before and knew her to be a very rational person. She urged everyone to reduce their prejudices and have a proper talk with Roland first. Since they had already prepared to communicate with the secular kingdoms, and now a mortal king who did not discriminate against witches and was preparing for the divine war was in front of them, this could be a good start. Pasha took a deep breath. Regardless of the future, for now, an enlightened monarch like Roland seemed the most suitable candidate for negotiations. What will happen next would be decided after the talks. She then turned to Phyllis earnestly, requesting her to arrange a meeting with the king. Soon after, Roland entered the hall, accompanied by Agatha and Nightingale. He was immediately drawn to the enormous purple screen, which seemed like a live broadcast. His attention momentarily stalled at the sight of a gigantic tentacled creature. Pasha, standing at the forefront, was the first to speak, apologizing for making Roland wait and introducing herself as Pasha, one of the Takira survivors. After a basic mutual understanding was established, Wendy, Scroll, and Tilly also entered the room, and everyone sat down at the table to begin their first round of communication. Pasha was somewhat surprised, noting that Roland seemed unfazed by her appearance. She had thought it would take him a long time to accept that they were witches. Roland, in his mind, thought about concepts like spirit possession and prosthetics, which he had seen before. However, he chose a different approach, telling Pasha that the red moon was approaching and time was of the essence for both parties. Rather than harboring mutual suspicions and secrets, it was better to be open and honest from the start. As Takira had once been rulers of the continent, they should understand this principle. Pasha paused for a moment, then chuckled lightly, agreeing with Phyllis that Roland was indeed a unique mortal. With the pleasantries over, it was time to get to the heart of the matter. Roland expressed his alignment with the Takira witches in their common goal, which is combating the demons. He also guessed that the witches had sent Phyllis not only to find the chosen one but also to attempt communication with the secular kingdoms. Pasha candidly admitted that their original plan was to infiltrate all 4 kingdoms, gradually recruiting or controlling some mortals to search for the chosen one, with Phyllis's participation in the exhibition being part of this strategy. However, the failure of the church had given them another hope, allowing them to not hide underground, and bringing all witches together in one place. According to their intelligence, the slumbering island the fjords had the most witches, but their leader was also the sister of the king of Grey Castle, which was also the kingdom that defeated the church. They were somewhat surprised to have connected with Grey Castle so early in their plans. Roland smiled and said that perhaps this was fate, saving them years of effort and giving them ample time to get to know each other and discuss matters. Pasha also giggled but added, with a bitter smile, that this was all under the premise that they could defeat the demons and continue to thrive on this continent. Roland expressed his willingness to assist the Takira witches in their continued search for the chosen one but hoped that the witches would not withhold anything from him. Pasha nodded in agreement, willing to answer any of Roland's questions. What Roland wanted to know most was what exactly the Takira witches had discovered in the ruins and how this led to the split between the 2 major powers, ultimately causing the split of the Federation. This question clearly touched a sore spot for the Takira witches. The witches behind Pasha voiced their concerns and dissatisfaction, and some even hesitated to share these details with Roland, citing the great sacrifices they had made. Pasha interrupted their discussions, arguing that their sacrifices shouldn't be in vain. She challenged the witches, asking if they intended to take these secrets to their graves in the event of being overwhelmed by the demon's onslaught, just like the tombs they had discovered. Her questions silenced the room. Turning back to Roland, Pasha apologized and after a moment of silence, she continued, explaining that it was more accurate to say that the ruins found them, or rather, a much earlier civilization. This happened shortly after the start of the First Divine War, about 800 years ago. Roland pondered, realizing the time frame. Pasha revealed that what found them was a civilization, one that had perished underground. Initially, people didn't realize this and didn't choose to communicate, mistaking the other party for a new type of demon, hence the historical records were significantly skewed. It wasn't until the late period of the Second Divine War, when Takira and the Federation were on the brink of extinction, that they discovered the secrets. The method of soul transfer was also from the stone tablets left by this civilization and verified this possibility on an unhatched subject. Since then, the top 3 seats of the Federation began their research on the transformation of the God Punishment Army. Agatha was astonished, as she had never heard of this before. Pasha explained that this was the highest secret of the Federation, known only to the 3 seats and a few members. As for Pasha and the rest of the Takira witches, they only learned of this shocking news after the fall of Takira. Pasha then explained that the grotesque body she was using was a result of the soul transferring method. She continued with a long story. The Federation, following the clues on the stone tablets, had discovered a massive city underground. This majestic subterranean city, filled with countless passageways and cavities as complex as a maze, was thus named the Labyrinthine Ruins. Sadly, before they could explore it thoroughly, Takira fell into the hands of demons, forcing everyone into a desperate escape. After paying a heavy price, they finally reached the labyrinth, where the plan was to take everything from the ruins and then head to the Hermes to establish a new holy city. However, what happened next was unforeseeable. Roland noticed a shift in Pasha's emotions as she spoke with increasing sorrow. The city in the ruin was almost brand new, harboring many incredible secrets, the most important of which were the things they called magic core, the host, and the records of the previous civilization. They later realized that the labyrinthine ruins were prepared for them, leading them here since 800 years ago. Tilly asked what was the reason behind it. Who had led them here? To answer her question, another voice resonated, telling them, this underground civilization hoped they would destroy the demons to avenge their race's annihilation. Pasha then followed up, clarifying it was just Natalia's theory. Perhaps the underground civilization merely wanted to pass on their civilization. The Federation found a lot of information in the ruins, especially about the magic core, which was the cause of a split among the three seats. The tablets suggested that magic holds infinite possibilities and that pursuing the divine will is the process of mastering magic. Roland, sensing this crucial message, asked what the magic core was. Pasha explained that it's powerful and capable of altering its form at will. This astonishing device upended the Federation's understanding. The illusionary device they now used was a smaller magic core, while the divine instrument was the largest magic core in the ruins. Roland began to view this magic core as a universal terminal, far more powerful than witches, useful in both production and combat. Pasha regretfully said their understanding and application were still rudimentary. The tablet prophesied that as they delved deeper into magic, they would become indistinguishable from gods. Roland stood up, knowing that Takira witches were running out of time. Turned out, Roland was right, as the Takira witches didn't know how long it would take for them to truly understand the magic core and utilize it. It could take hundreds or even thousands of years. Back then, after the fall of Takira, resources at the time were only sufficient to focus on one research. Most importantly, the God Punishment Army project conflicted with what was recorded in the tablet, because, once they abandon their witch body and become God Punishment soldiers, they will forever lose the divine will. Roland already knew what happened next. When the God Punishment Army was no longer the sole method to combat the demons, a division emerged. Some, unwilling to become mere vessels, disagreed with Acarus. Beyond ideological differences, there was a deeper cause. The Federation's leadership was acutely aware that neither approach guaranteed victory against the demons. Acarus's God Punishment Army project could utilize thousands of God Punishment warriors to fight off the demons for decades, but replenishing these warriors in case of losses was difficult. The Chosen One project was more of a gamble on luck, but if successful, it promised no side effects and could even bring the witches closer to the gods. The two strategies contrasted starkly, one fought for the present, while the other gambled on the future. What happened next was the catastrophic end of both transcendent witch leaders. Then, the last of the top three seats, Eleanor stepped forward and put an end to the internal conflict. She merged herself with the central host, becoming the first witch to undergo the fusion. With the loss of the three transcendent leaders, the Federation's highest combat power crumbled, and the ruins became an inseparable part of the survivors' lives. They reached an agreement: some would stay behind to continue their research, while the rest would proceed to Hermes to build the new holy city as originally planned. Due to the limited number of original hosts, the church would provide new vessels to the labyrinthine ruins for a period of 100 years. If no breakthroughs were made or the Chosen One was not found by then, all research results, including the soul-transferring devices and original hosts, would be reclaimed by the church. If the Takira witches failed to comply, the church would not show mercy. Hearing this, Roland found this to be odd. If Pasha and the rest were still in the ruins, this must have indicated that the church had not come or perhaps forgotten about it. Pasha nodded, saying for a long time, they lacked the capability to explore outside, the body they were in couldn't be exposed to the sun, and the witches who transferred their souls needed time to adapt to new bodies, leaving them unaware of the situation in Hermes. When they were finally able to explore the outside, they later realized that the new order they had constructed no longer followed Lady Acarus's will. Agatha slammed the table, stating everything now made sense. Acarus wouldn't have gone to such lengths. Compared to the God Punishment Army project, the church's approach was completely aimed at wiping out the witch race. The Takira witches nodded in agreement and thought the same too. After a while, Roland raised another question: what exactly was the central host, and how did it differ from the original hosts? To answer him, Celine explained that both belonged to the perished underground civilization, and the people from this civilization were fragile, forcing them to live in these vessels to achieve immortality. But their exact origin was unclear in the documents. Roland, intrigued by the witch speaking, which she then introduced herself as Celine, who had worked with Agatha before. Agatha acknowledged knowing Celine but wasn't very familiar with her. However, she heard that Celine was usually a quiet and shy girl but became a different person when discussing matters related to magic. Roland nodded, then inquired if the witches merged with the central host were still alive and if she could communicate. Celine explains that besides Lady Eleanor and more than 10 witches severely injured in the conflict, 36 volunteers were later merged to awaken the central host. However, not everyone was willing to be imprisoned in a senseless cage for life. The biggest regret was the inability to communicate properly. They could only respond with a yes or no. Considering this, Roland asked if the central host could answer any question. Celine clarified that the question must be understandable. The clearer the conditions, the quicker the response. Roland immediately thought of likening it to a primitive biological computer system. Could it solve equations or perform complex calculations independently if given the right conditions? He pondered a plan to bring it to the city of Neverwinter for research, though he knew he couldn't make such a request yet. The witches in the hall noticed Roland's expression and looked at him curiously, realizing he had some ideas brewing. Roland coughed twice and said he had a basic understanding of the Takira witches' situation but had one last question. The witches, the church, and ancient texts repeatedly mentioned the term divine will. He even heard about a mysterious room of the church, with a secret chamber accessible only to the Pope, where one could see the gods. He wanted to know what this so-called divine will really was. Pasha, surprised by Roland's extensive knowledge, revealed that they only learned about the divine will after the fall of Takira. She was curious about how Roland came to know this. Smiling, Roland explained that it was he who defeated the church, and the witches formerly serving the church were now in the city of Neverwinter. Pasha carefully observed this mortal king for a few seconds before preparing to tell Roland, hoping he would keep it confidential. Not just Roland, but all the witches in the hall were expected to keep this a secret. Divine will turned out to be a large transparent stone of God punishment, which allowed us to connect with the gods and see things. Roland was curious about what could be seen, so Pasha described the visions produced by the divine will in detail. Tilly then asked what the 4 paintings represented. Pasha admitted this question had puzzled people for 1,000 years. Only in the ruins did they begin to understand. The divinity showed them humanity, demons, unknown enemies, and the underground civilization. One of the paintings, representing the underground civilization, was now blank, coinciding with the time shortly after the First Divine War. By comparing self-narratives in the documents and records passed down by the Federation, they speculated that this civilization had been permanently erased from the Divine War. Roland gulped hard, contemplating this so-called divine war. Was it merely a struggle to seize relics from each other until a final victor emerged? Who or what orchestrated all this? Was it coincidence or fate? A random selection or a predetermined destiny? Were the Takira witches' interpretations correct? A flurry of questions raced through his mind. As he pondered, Tilly asked what would happen if someone obtained all 4 relics. Pasha shook her head, calmly stating that no one knew. She said that the god didn't favor humanity nor any of the races, but only the victor. Wendy, distressed by these revelations, couldn't grasp why everyone had been killing each other for nearly 1,000 years over something whose purpose was unknown. She expressed disbelief and sorrow at the seeming callousness of the divine will. Pasha empathized with Wendy but admitted she didn't have an answer, only a cryptic line from the documents that might explain her questions. We are all children of divinity, but only a few will witness the dawn. From the moment we perceive magic, our extraordinary lives are destined. This eternal competition has been long-standing, and reaching this stage is already 1 in a million. Birds were not originally birds, and we were not originally us. It is through strife that all things persist, and through competition that life endures. Roland's mind was struck by a metaphorical lightning bolt. He suddenly stood up, intently gazing at the large screen, and asked Pasha to repeat what she had just said. Scroll, who had recorded everything the Takira witches mentioned, repeated the phrase, "This eternal competition has been long-standing, and reaching this stage is already 1 in a million." Roland interpreted this as a long evolutionary path. From the very beginning to civilization, every species that had survived had outlasted countless competitors. The description of the underground civilization fits seamlessly into this process. Upon reflection, these 4 civilizations, though seemingly distinct, shared one similarity, which is the ability to wield magic. Humans birth witches who can utilize magic. The demons and the underground civilization had an even better understanding of magic. If there's no surprise, the unknown civilization should also possess the capability to manipulate magic. And the quote, "We are all children of divinity," likely refers to all species endowed with this extraordinary gift. Following this line of reasoning, the divine war might not be about guarding or fighting for the relics, but a means of accelerated evolution, or perhaps, a rule of the magic world. After some time, the discussion between Roland and the Takira witches resumed, covering topics such as who had been safeguarding the relics. "And it's because of the relic, so the Hermes is always under heavy attacks by the demonic beasts." It was also mentioned that the church, having been severely weakened, was no longer capable of protecting the relics, prompting the witches to seize it back to the ruins. They also explained how they used the divine instrument to repel the demonic beasts. By the end of the discussion, Roland had gained a preliminary understanding of the history and the Takira witches. Clearly, both parties shared a common enemy in the demons, and they agreed to form a united front or an alliance, with mutual protection and assistance. The Takira witches were pleased to hear this, hoping Roland would continue to recruit witches and aid Phyllis in the search for the chosen one. They agreed to maintain contact. Roland nodded in agreement with Pasha but also suggested that the Takira witches relocate to a mountain range near the city of Neverwinter, which he thought suitable for them. This suggestion drew various reactions from the other side, ranging from concern to apprehension. Roland looked at everyone in the room, signaling reassurance, and shared his thoughts. He didn't believe it was wise for the Takira witches to guard the relics alone. He pointed out that Hermes had resisted the demonic beasts with its massive walls and asked whether the Takira witches could withstand a surprise attack by demons and demonic beasts. Selene confidently stated that they could manage, provided the divine instrument and its magic core were repaired. However, Roland shook his head, cautioning that the demons were much stronger and smarter than the demonic beasts. He noted that the corpses of the demonic beasts near the ruins indicated that they had not only breached the ruins but had also approached their core area. He speculated that the divine instrument had a limited range and questioned their defense against sudden attacks by demons. Pasha, her tiny tentacles twitching slightly, found no words to refute. Roland spoke gently, expressing his wish to help. He said, "Trust is the foundation of cooperation. Placing the relics in a location deemed safe by both parties will build the most basic trust, right?" Pasha did not immediately respond but requested a few minutes for discussion. On the screen, the tentacled beings touched each other in what seemed to be their way of communicating, though Roland couldn't hear them. After a short while, Pasha spoke again, but before addressing his question, she had a query of her own. Roland understood that Pasha had more to say when she asked who would lead this alliance. Her explanation was that since everyone's survival was at stake, every decision should be thoroughly considered. Thus, they proposed a joint governance system, where commands would be jointly discussed and issued by the leaders of the strongest groups. This approach, she argued, would effectively prevent poor judgments and ensure the alignment of interests among all parties. Roland commented that this sounded similar to the Federation's system. Pasha clarified that considering the current 4 major kingdoms plus all of the witch organizations, decision-making didn't necessarily have to be limited to a 3-seat model. They could emulate the Federation's early days with a roundtable council of 11 leaders to formulate battle plans. Roland, after some thought, recognized Pasha's intelligence. If seats were assigned based on strength, the Takira witches, by maintaining communication with other witch organizations and strengthening their natural sense of identity, could ensure their own interests. However, Roland, no longer the ruler of a small and remote border town, disagreed with her proposal. Asserting his position in an irrefutable tone, he stated there would only be one leader, and that would be himself. This was the most efficient and stable approach. His direct refusal momentarily silenced the room, as everyone turned to look at him. Roland knew it wasn't the time for modesty. While joint governance might be a suitable choice for the Federation, it wasn't for him. Only he understood what industrialization required and how to maximize the potential of his territory. Maintaining equality between the common folks and witches is something he has been striving for. He can't risk having the old Federation way of ruling. Clearing his throat, he continued, a united front alliance is a safeguard against the demons, but he is not demanding immediate integration. Relocating to the western region is merely the foundation of building trust. Rather than relying on verbal agreements, he invited the Takira witches to see for themselves. He suggested they witness firsthand the city of Neverwinter's strength and determination in combating the demons, as well as see the organization that is currently working with the city of Neverwinter. By then, with a full understanding, the Takira witches could then make a free choice. Even if they refused his leadership, Roland affirmed he would still maintain basic cooperation, assisting them in their search for the Chosen One and their research endeavors. Celine questioned if this would hold true even if they didn't hand over the relics and the magic core. Roland nodded, clarifying that he had no intention of relying on these items from the ruins to defeat the demons. As long as the relic's safety was assured, he didn't care about their location. Pasha pondered Roland's words. Celine, now with a colder tone, questioned Roland's approach of sole leadership. She pointed out that if the Divine War continued for decades, with Roland now being an old man, would he still make proper decisions? How about his successor, or his descendants, and whether they can follow his will and lead everyone to move forward? She then stated that only a joint governance system could effectively address these concerns. Roland, with a confident smile, assured them there was no need to worry. First, he didn't believe the demons could resist for so long. Secondly, he implied that his life expectancy might exceed everyone combined. He briefly explained how he had acquired Zero and her ability to absorb others' lifespans. Pasha initially looked at Roland in surprise and fear. To be honest, Roland wasn't sure if Zero's lifespan would transfer to him since he didn't get any of her magic, but he felt it necessary to bluff at this moment. The Takira witches engaged in a heated discussion again. After some time, Pasha acknowledged his points. Her voice grew more solemn as she mentioned the abundance of items needing relocation from the ruins. It would take them at least a month. Pasha requested that they be allowed to rebuild their underground palace and laboratory independently and asked for Roland's assistance with materials. Roland agreed, curious about how they planned to accomplish this. Pasha mentioned they could rely on a creature to dig holes, which immediately reminded Agatha of the creature that had made the demon's camp disappear. Pasha was puzzled. She hadn't sent the creature there, considering the substantial amount of food it consumed. They couldn't afford for the creature to go that far. Roland then briefly described the phenomena the witches encountered in the misty forest and west of the western region, pointing to the map and the images of the giant creature consuming things. Pasha nodded, then speculated that within the snow-capped mountain, there might also be remnants of an underground civilization. This was weird because Pasha had previously said the entire underground civilization had been wiped out. But her explanation about the creatures being just vessels like the ones they currently use. The soul transfer process allowed anyone to control these monstrous bodies. Roland pondered this for a moment, which startled him. Everyone else in the hall also looked serious. Everyone seemed to arrive at the same conclusion. The creature appeared twice so far, once targeting Agatha's research tower and then the demon's camp. This must have involved the unknown civilization. This civilization might have discovered the ruins within the snowy mountain and used the creature's shell as a host. He wondered if this civilization also had access to the magic core and central host. How advanced are they in terms of technology and the understanding of magic, or they were capable of creating a divine instrument targeting witches just like the divine instrument Takira witches have for demons? Additionally, there could also be ruins of the underground civilization. Based on historical records, Celine urgently requested Roland's help to explore this snowy mountain, fearing the ruins falling into enemy hands. Roland agreed to assist.
Pasha also promised they would begin their relocation efforts soon.
He extended his hand towards the screen. Pasha, initially confused after Roland told her this was a gesture of trust, eventually mimicked by outstretching her tentacles. Lastly, Roland inquired about Pasha's knowledge of the underwater ruins, to which she shook her head.
If even Pasha had no idea about the underwater ruins, then who might be controlling the area?
He took a deep breath. He hoped he could get some answers when Thunder came back. Later that evening, Wendy visited Scroll's room, hesitating whether to knock. Suddenly, the door opened. Clearly, Scroll had anticipated Wendy's visit. As she too wanted to talk with Wendy, they then decided to go to Wendy's room. Once there, Wendy poured Scroll a cup of red chaos drink. Scroll was surprised by the flavor that Wendy got this month. The way the Witch Union received these chaos drinks from Roland was interesting. Every month, they had the chance to draw a random bottle from the chaos drinks made by Evelyn. As they savored the delicious drink, Wendy recalled Roland's words.
There can only be one leader, and that's me.
Remembering Roland's always approachable nature, she had been worried that he might hesitate on crucial issues. Now, it seemed he exceeded her expectations, becoming more stable and decisive over the years, evolving into a true king. What amazed Wendy even more was that despite Roland's maturation in his role, his attitude towards witches and ordinary people remained unchanged. She knew Scroll felt this way too, hence waiting for her at the door. Wendy, smiling, told Scroll that she had given Roland the ability test result of Annie and others. While discussing Broken Sword's ability, Scroll pondered for a moment and thought of Nightingale and Ashes, thinking that only they could unleash the full power of Broken Sword. Everyone else was not suited for direct combat with the enemy, regardless of their high magic power. Although many in the Witch Union had combat abilities, they weren't true combat witches. Wendy smiled softly, had thought the same too. However, Roland thought otherwise.
Roland hadn't assigned Broken Sword to anyone.
Scroll was puzzled, and Wendy recounted Roland's words. Weapons generally need to be carried all the time, which would restrict the Broken Sword's freedom. Moreover, Roland said its sword energy might not necessarily be more powerful than firearms and cannons. Instead of making her a weapon, Roland hoped to allow her to work alongside everyone and assign tasks based on the Broken Sword's interests.
Scroll smiled while hearing this. Roland cared about the witches' feelings first, rather than their utility. Perhaps that's why Nightingale chose to support him unreservedly.
Looking back, they were glad to have trusted Nightingale's judgment. With these thoughts, Wendy filled their cups and raised a toast to find a truly great king. This episode narrates a multitude of historical events and terminology, which might confuse some viewers. Here, I will try my best to provide a simplified explanation and summary. Today, Roland finally makes contact with the Takira witches. He learns what caused the split among the federations.
During the Second Divine War, the Federation's top 3 seats, aka the leaders at the time, were held by Acharis, Natalia, and Eleanor.
Due to the discovery of the soul transfer method and information about the Divine War in the underground civilization's ruins, they disagreed on how they should fight the demons,
ultimately leading to the Federation's split and a civil war. Acharis' faction moved to the Hermes, establishing what was later known as the Church and becoming its first pope.
The other faction, led by Natalia, retreated to the desolate mountains. The Church, founded by Acharis, initiated the God Punishment Army project after their disastrous defeat in the Second Divine War. However, this project, which required the sacrifice of witches, faced opposition from Natalia. Acharis insisted on continuing the project. This project, ideally, will give humans at least a couple more decades of time, but abandoning the witches' bodies would cause them to lose the divine will. While the Chosen One project needed witches to survive.
But it's unknown when to find the Chosen One.
Soon after, the Federation fell into a civil war, with Acharis and Natalia perishing together, and Eleanor voluntarily becoming the first to merge with the Central Host.
The Central Host could input questions and receive feedback.
Roland believes this might be the most primitive biological computer or calculator system. With the only 3 transcendent witches, aka the top 3 seats, gone, The two factions came to an agreement with the church continuing the God Punishment Army project while Pasha and others continued their research and search for the Chosen One. They agreed that if Pasha and her group didn't find the Chosen One in 100 years, the church would reclaim everything. A century passed, and the church didn't return because the witches had been overthrown by mortals, changing the nature of the church. When Pasha and the rest of the Takira witches were capable of going out, everything changed, and the church was defeated by Roland. The church was originally established to combat the demon and prepare for the Third Divine War, with the method being the sacrifice of weaker non-combat witches in exchange for the more powerful God Punishment Army. However, over 400 years, the church was overtaken by mortals. Being afraid of the witches regaining power, they started systematically oppressing witches and trafficking young girls. Captured or awakened witches were either trained as pure ones or killed. In the following conversation, Roland learns that the Divine War was fought by at least 4 civilizations over each other's relics, including humans and demons. They also learned of the defeated underground civilization, where the Takira witches discovered magic cores, original host, central host, and historical records of vanished civilizations. The underground civilization, physically weak, relied on the original host for survival, basically what Pasha is using right now. The 4th civilization is still uncertain, but Roland suspects it's related to the ruins in the sea, where Thunder and his exploration team are investigating. As for the reason behind the Divine War, according to the lengthy message from the underground civilization, Roland suspects it was to promote evolution, with the losers facing complete annihilation, and the winner gaining the Divine Will, possibly achieving godhood or becoming God.